In this guitar lesson, we are going to take a really close look at how to play country and bluegrass sounding fill riffs in the key of D. This is going to be really useful for playing fill riffs, and it's also going to be useful for just playing lead guitar in general. Today, we're mostly going to look at this area on the guitar neck, right here near the nut. We'll be looking at a couple different guitar scales. We'll analyze these scales, and I will show you all different note combinations that will make your guitar licks have that country twang that we're going for. A lot of the scale notes that we'll be using today are going to be open strings. We'll be doing a bunch of pull-offs and hammer-ons to and from the open strings to get this country sound, something like this. Quick example. Hopefully this is helpful. I'm going to try to show you all how I visualize the guitar neck right here when I'm improvising and creating these licks. Anyways, let's go ahead and zoom in here and let's start going through this guitar lesson. We're going to first look at the guitar scales, and then I'll give you all a bunch of other tips. Right here on the screen, we've got the two scales that we'll be using today to create this country and bluegrass sound. Since we're in the key of D, we're going to have the second position scale shapes right here. The second position scale shapes, key of D. You can see these two scale charts. We've got the major scale and then the blues scale. Both of those second position shapes, key of D. Let's just play through each one of these so you can hear them. You can download these scale charts here at Country Guitar Online and study them later if you want to on your own time, but let's just take a quick listen. Here's the major scale. I'm going to play down the scale, starting on the high E string, just like that. All of those notes fit very nicely over the D major chord. A quick note on this scale chart, you can see we played the 4th fret, 3rd string there. That's actually a duplicate note. That's the same as the open B string. But I still wanted to show the 4th fret note on that chart, just because technically that is a note that you can press down when you're creating these fills. Okay, then we got the blues scale. Take a listen. Still fits nicely over the D major chord, but got a little bluesier sound. And remember, the blues scale, it's the exact same thing as the minor pentatonic scale. We're just adding one extra note per octave. And if you look on the chart, the extra note is that the note's shown in blue. And all the other notes, that's just minor pentatonic scale. So that's the blues scale there. Memorize these two scale shapes, get real familiar with them. But next, we are going to take a look at different note combinations. We're going to start mixing the major scale and the blues scale together. And I'll show you some of my favorite little combinations, little phrases of notes that I use all the time when I'm creating fill riffs. These scales, keep these scales in mind as I'm showing you some of my favorite little note combinations and phrases. First one I like to use a lot is this one here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and So that first hammer on there, it says first fret hammer to the second. Just looking at the scales, that note is from the blues scale. And then when we hammer on there, that is a major scale note. So you can see how we're starting to combine these scales. Major scale and the blues scale. So that's the first part. Hammer. There's a pull off at the end. One of my favorite ways to start out licks in the key of D, right there. And after you get to that note, you just slide up with your ring finger, 4th string. And that slide on the 4th string, that's another really important couple of notes right there. I use that all the time. And if you look at the scale charts, that note on the 3rd fret, 4th string, that's from the blues scale. You can see it on the chart. But then when we slide up, we kind of resolve it into the major scale note there on the 4th fret. And that is such a cool... I use that slide in a bunch of different ways. And what I was doing there, you could repeat stuff like that. And that type of thing sounds great also. What I was doing there. So slide up, open, and then hammer on the 5th string, oops, to the 3rd fret. Anyways, let's get back to this. That's the first riff we looked at there. It's a cool one. Change it up just a little bit in the beginning. Now let's do similar sound, except instead of doing the hammer on in the beginning, we're going to do a pull off. And we're pulling off upward, by the way, right there on the 1st fret. Just 1st fret, pulling off to open. And the reason I pull off upward is because we're pulling off in the direction we're headed. So the note right after that pull off is the 2nd string. Pull off upward towards the 2nd string instead of pulling off downwards, because look what happens when you pull off downward. Now you're going to come all the way back up here, oops, to hit that next note, so it's not very efficient. Talked about these pulling off in the direction you're headed in a lot of my other videos, but I can't stress that enough. Really build up your efficiency. So that's the kind of like variation number 2 of that riff. It's 1 measure riff. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. There's a couple ideas, and here's another one. Pause the video if you want to work on those some, but here's another idea. I use that one a bunch too. It's 1 measure long as well. We're starting on the 3rd fret, 2nd string. Just walk down that scale there. It's upward pull off. Kind of got that similar sound, but just a different starting point. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Sounds great from the transitioning from a D chord into a fill riff, back to another D chord, or you could do a D chord into another chord after that. And that one, maybe that riff wasn't the best example to transition to another chord, but check this out. Let's go back to that first idea that we did with the hammer, and instead of ending it with that slide, let's try something different. See that? Just 2 picks on the open strings. 3rd string, 4th string. So hammer, ring, pointer, pull off. So what I'm trying to show y'all is that those last 2 notes, and we just changed up the riff a little bit. Reason we're leaving those open strings there, it lets those notes ring at the end of the riff. It gives you time to change chords from the D chord from the riff, into the G chord. Because I always like to end a 1 measure or 2 measure riff with maybe some open strings that belong to the next chord that you're about to transition to, if that makes sense. So, say you got a progression with 2 measures of D and 2 measures of G. You can do 1 measure of D rhythm, 1 measure of D rhythm, and then 1 measure of the riff. Let those strings ring into the G. So we did 1 measure of G and then another fill. And you just go back and forth with that. So this riff right there, the one that we're using to replace the measure of the G chord. See, we ended on the open A string, which lets you move back to a D chord, possibly. It's just a nice transition, because makes sense. D chord, and you can let that A string right there, or let that ring out as you move back to the D chord rhythm, because the A note kind of belongs to that D chord. So letting the note ring out at the end of that riff creates creates a nice overtone and it smooths out the fill riff. Makes for better transition. This is just a bunch of random stuff coming out, but hopefully this is helpful. I'm going to keep on just showing y'all some other ideas as we work from these skinnier strings and all the way down into some of the lower strings, that lower register. So anyways, we've gone over a few things so far. That little hammer-on, that little riff there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we looked at it starting out with a pull-off. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we started it at a different starting point on the second string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. What you can do now is start working down to these lower strings. And we've already gone over that fill riff there.